I'm excited to be here to talk to all of you about making videos and a little bit about media literacy. Um, I hope you all had a chance to watch my video about the Bechdel test. It was a short little 2-minute video, and I'm going to be going over that. So I will first start by telling you a little bit about what I do. We'll talk a little bit more about the Bechdel test, and then I will give you a couple of tips on how to make your videos awesome. So I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I run a video web series called Feminist Frequency, where I deconstruct pop culture and I look at the representations of women, people of color, alternative sexualities, and people, able-bodied peoples in the media. And I look at reoccurring patterns that happen over and over again to see how they how people are represented and the sort of effects that has on us as the audience. So one of the reasons I started Feminist Frequency was because I believe that the media has a really big role in influencing how we view ourselves, how we view other people, how we think about the world. And so when you have certain stereotypes and certain representations and certain messages and myths told over and over and over again, continuously for many years, those messages, we start to take those messages and think of them as fact or as part of the world. And so, what are the messages we're getting? Are they good messages? Are they harmful messages? What are they? I also like to think of it, well, actually, I should say that also the media is just one of the many ways in which these messages about ourselves in the world get told to us. We have influences such as our families, religious institutions, schools, friends, all those sorts of things. So the media is just one component of our larger socialization. I like to think of it also as the air that we breathe, right? We all interact with the media many times throughout our days. More and more as many of us sit on the internet all day long. And so I like to think of it as the air that we breathe. And it's our job, and it's in everyone's interest to make sure that the air isn't polluted with toxic, sexist, and racist representations. I hope that makes sense to everyone. Okay, so I'm gonna move on a little bit. I wanted to give you a tool that you can use to deconstruct the media yourself. It's just one small little tool to start thinking about movies a little more critically. And that is the Bechdel test, which, again, I hope you watched that video. So the Bechdel test is a really brief, short little tool. It was created by a woman named Alison Bechdel, who's pictured in the slide that you hopefully all can see. She started a comic in the 80s called Dykes to Watch Out For, and it was actually a really critical time when this came out because there was not a lot of literature and not a lot of pop culture around LGBT and queer representation. So it was a really fundamental body of work. And in 1985, in one of her comics, she just had 2 characters talking about this test. So since then, we're in 2012 now, so many decades later, this test is still going on and people are using it to deconstruct movies. And what the test is a movie will pass if it answers these 3 questions. So it has to have at least 2 or more women in it who have names, who talk to each other, and who talk to each other about something besides a man. Now, if you watch my video, you will have seen how astonishingly a ridiculous amount of movies don't pass this test. It's so simple and so basic, and there's so many movies that just don't pass. And really what this test is useful for is to look at recurring patterns, right? So the way that women are represented within Hollywood overall, right? It's not just one movie or 5 movies, but it's over and over and over again. So what we're seeing is that women are not portrayed in any meaningful role in relation to the plot, right? They're not helping the plot move forward in the story, that they're not given really meaningful characters to play, that they're, girlfriends or mothers. And even some of the movies that star women don't really have any other women in it. It's just the one woman in the movie. So it's a really sort of basic gauge just to get an idea of how women are actually included in meaningful ways in Hollywood movies. I will say this. This does not mean that a movie is feminist or not. Passing the test, it doesn't mean a movie is good or not. It has no bearing on the quality of the film. Some of favorite films that I think are exceptional don't pass this test. And some movies that pass the test with flying colors have some of the most stereotypical sexist representations of women. So it is not a gauge on quality. It's just to get a general idea of the institution and the systemic way in which we see women in movies. So I thought we could just go through 2 quick movies that came this year, 2 really popular high-grossing movies. One is The Avengers. Who has seen this movie? Raise your hands because I can see you. Sweet. Well, The Avengers has raised over $1.5 billion worldwide, so I'm not surprised that many of you have seen it. It's the 3rd highest grossing film of all time, so it did pretty well. And I'm assuming most people are familiar with the story, but it's based on Marvel Comics, and it takes superheroes from the Marvel universe and brings them all together to save Earth from aliens, basically, is what this is about. And if you I'm going to give you just a quick second to think about the movie and think if you ever saw a time in which 2 women were interacting, talking to each other about anything besides a man. Okay, I'm seeing hands moving, thoughts happening. Okay, so let's go from the beginning. It has to have at least 2 more women in it who have names. So it passes this. There's Pepper Potts, who is from the Iron Man universe. There's Black Widow, and there's Agent Hill. Now, do any of them ever talk to each other? So we're talking, this is a long movie with a lot of characters in it. And none of them talk to each other at all in this film. It's remarkable. So obviously they didn't talk about a man either because they're not talking about to each other at all. So what does this mean, right? Again, this is just one film in the huge universe of films that don't pass this test, right? It's not like I'm picking on The Avengers. It was actually a really amazing film in a lot of ways. But what does it mean when the 3rd highest grossing film of all time doesn't have female characters talking to each other at all? What does that mean for the way that women interact with each other, the way that women are viewed in terms of their importance in films and their role? And you'll also notice that there are 7 main characters in this film, right? 7 superhero characters, and only one of them is a woman. So that's also kind of another issue that you could look at in terms of who are the stars of these stories. And again, I'm going to say this again and again. The Bechdel test does not assess the quality of the film, right? And that is very indicative with this one. Okay, let's move on to another one. Hunger Games. Who saw the Hunger Games?
Hey, Anita, wait, before you go on, somebody's got their hand up in the chat.
Oh, really? I didn't see that. Sorry, there's so much going on. How do I deal with that?
I don't know.
Leah put her hand up, but maybe it was just answering.
It says no, go ahead. No question?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on then.
Good eye.
And I'll have time afterwards for... Oh, yes, thank you. You're participating by raising your hand when I ask to raise your hand. Excellent. Okay, and I'll have time for questions afterwards too. So, okay, The Hunger Games. So this was another high-grossing film of this year. It raised $600 million worldwide, I believe. And it's based on a really best-selling young adult fiction trilogy books. And it stars a woman named Katniss Everdeen. And it takes place in this future dystopian world called Panem, where they randomly select children to go and kill each other in the Hunger Games, which is a game that the sort of elite watch as show. Where it has a very reality TV feel to it, except they brutally murder each other. It's really rather creepy. But so The Hunger Games is a very interesting movie in a lot of ways. One, because it's starring a woman and it made as much money as it did, which is kind of rare in Hollywood. And so let's see if it passes the test. So it has to have 2 or more women in it who have names. It does. So one, there's the lead, Katniss Everdeen, her sister Primrose, and there's another woman named Effie Trinket, who are main characters in the movie. And there's a bunch of other female characters who are actually named in the film and who talk. Almost the first or second scene, it passes the test because there are two characters, Primrose and Katniss, who are sisters who talk to each other, and they're talking to each other about their fear about the Hunger Games. So it has nothing to do with a man. So it almost instantly passes. And there's other instances within the film in which it passes as well. So this is a good example of a film that passes on many levels. Sometimes when applying this test, you'll notice that there's like one line in the whole film that makes a test pass. So that's another thing to look at, is the quantity in which women are participating and speaking to each other in the narrative. The Hunger Games is sort of exceptional because there aren't a lot of, sadly, a lot of films that get made within Hollywood that star women that are these big, awesome blockbuster action films. And so the Hunger Games is hopefully indicative of that these films can do very well, that people want to see them. And it was a really remarkable film with a really remarkable female character in it. So I was happy to see that do really well. So those are just two examples of ways that you can apply the Bechdel test. Again, it's not about any sort of gauge of quality, right? It's just to give you an idea of where women are at in these films so that you can see over and over again. And so this is just one little tool that you can put in your media literacy arsenal of ways that you can start deconstructing the media to look at representations of people and the messages and myths that come with them. Okay. Is there any questions about the Bechdel test before we move on? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go into product tips. So we're going to switch gears completely here. I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback. So I've been making feminist frequency videos since 2009. I'm on my 4th season of doing them. And I learned a lot along the way. A lot of this stuff was self-taught. I hadn't done a lot of editing before then. And so I'm really sort of was learning as I was going along, which was a really amazing experience for me. And so I just wanted to pass along a couple of tips about recording yourselves that hopefully you can apply for this week's lesson or this week's assignment in using the newscaster template. So one of the big things that I do in my videos is I have me, and you'll see in the slide, where I'm on one side of the screen or the other, and I put an image over my shoulder. That image is what I use to help illustrate what I'm saying. Right, so the images, I think about them, I try to figure out what image would go best to illustrate and help prove the point that I'm trying to make within my videos. And it also gives the audience something to look at, because they, probably don't want to watch me talking for 10 minutes straight without some sort of other engagement. So having different images really helps make your point and helps keeps your audience engaged. And the newscaster template will allow you that if you film yourself in a way where you have space over your shoulder, you can just plop that image over your shoulder on one side or the other. So there's that. Okay, so just a couple of suggestions in terms of recording. So the rule of thirds. Who's ever heard of the rule of thirds? Yes, excellent. Everyone who's done filmmaking knows that. I'm just going to go over it really quickly for anyone who doesn't. So what you see here is you're seeing a crisscross, right, on the screen. I just took that same shot, and you can see that I aligned myself onto lines on the right or the left, so that your focus point goes to the right, and then the image can go to the left. And this is something the dots where I have the arrows linking are points of interest. And that's kind of where you want to frame your shot, is onto those points of interest. Your subject would be on those lines, right? Does that make sense? And that sort of just makes an image, both in photography and in video, much more dynamic and engaging, as opposed to having a shot where you're like in the bottom tiny little corner and there's all of this space around. You want to lay it out so that you're sort of a little bit off to the side, and add some depth and dimension to your shot. I will say too, before I go on, in that there's all of these rules. There's all these filmmaking rules and editing rules, and some of them are really valuable. But what I always say when I'm sort of teaching production is that it's important to learn the rules, and then you can break them when it works for what you need to do. So learning about the rule of thirds is really useful, and playing around with it and figuring out how the framing for whatever it is that you're shooting looks best is a huge creative part of this process. And so you'll notice that I have me on one point of interest, and you have the image on the other point of interest, and how that lays out. Okay. Next, so headroom. And I see this a lot on YouTube videos or Skype interviews or whatever it might be, in that really pay attention to how much room you have over your head. So you'll see there's two shots here. The top one is bad. Don't do that. You have all of this space, and it looks really weird. Like, the other example you can see is that there's just a little bit of space above. So you're framing, you're putting yourself in the whole frame, and you could, zoom in so that the frame is more of just your face and your shoulders, or however far out you want to go. That's your stylistic choice. But that you make sure that you don't have too much headroom above, because it just looks bad. Okay, next, backlighting, which is what Jacob was talking about. Okay, this is lighting is such a critical part of this, and you don't need a huge light setup. You don't need like expensive lights to make a good video. A lot of what I stress is that if you don't have the means to get the equipment, you can still do this, right? Sunlight is the ultimate. It's the best light source that we have, right? So it's just a matter of positioning yourself towards or against that. What backlighting is it means that you're shooting into the light. And so anything between your camera, Ben's illustrating if you want to see that, that's backlighting. You're shooting into the camera is shooting into a window or directly into the light source, which means that everything in between the camera and that light source is going to be shadowed. It looks awful. And you can see that from that top example, that you can't see the subject at all. It's super distracting, and it just looks awful. So a super easy way to fix that is for her to just position herself opposite, so shoot away from the window, or shoot towards the side, so you get some of that light coming in, but you don't have the window in the frame at all, if that makes sense. The other little trick or another thing to observe about lighting, the bottom image on this slide, she moved over a little bit, but the problem is there's this really strong light source in the frame, and that is distracting, because your eye, or the audience's eye, is going to go directly to whatever the light brightest in the screen is. So you want to just make sure that you're not shooting into light, and that you're using the light to light up, for lack of a better word, your subject, but you don't want to be shooting into it. So those are two examples to avoid. And lastly, the last little tip that I want to give is background. So there are many different ways to do this, and this will be your personal style and flavor, and I suggest looking at different videos and seeing what you like. I like to do a solid background because it's not distracting, and it has a professionalness to it that lends credence to my message of what I'm trying to say. So you can see a couple examples here. On the top, what's my left? Yeah, so top left is just a solid background, and I know that she shoots this on a wall. It's just a blank wall, and it looks great, and she said it really nicely. On the bottom, just below her, is a popular video blogging style where you're in front of a bookshelf or you're at your desk. Again, this is all personal choice. Sometimes it can look really cluttered. So just frame the shot, do a couple test shots, see what you like, see what you want in the shot and what you don't want in the shot. So for example, if you didn't want a poster in the background, like there's a poster there, you take that off or reframe yourself. Be conscious of what is in and around you. Directly beside him is Felicia Day, and she has a background, and it's not a solid background, but there's a couple little patterns there. And actually, if you watch her video blog, which is called The Flog, she has a desk in front of her, and so she zooms in and out of the desk. And so that's, again, another stylistic choice. Now, right above her is Smooth, who is an amazing video blogger and actually inspired me. And I love his work, but I'm about to critique his framing. So you'll notice that he has a picture on the wall to the right, and then to the left, there's a door frame and a doorknob. Now, this drives me crazy because he could have literally just scooted over just a little bit and not had the doorknob in the way. It's just distracting. You keep looking at it. If you move in and out or side to side, like the doorknob shows up and then it doesn't show up. And so you notice that as the viewer and it distracts from the message. So it would just be as easy as finding a solid wall or just removing whatever is in the background. I hope that makes sense. I had one other thing I wanted to bring up back here. So let me scoot back really quick. Okay, so I just showed this one shot where I'm on the right and I have a over the shoulder image. What I do in my videos, which hopefully you saw an example of, because this is from the Lego video that we sent out earlier this week, I have a side shot and then a middle shot. And so I literally just move like from the side to the middle in my videos to add a cut, to add some sort of movement and rhythm to help the video keep going and to keep people's interest going. It's also a way in which you can record small segments of your script at a time and then cut at whatever point you want to cut at, so that you don't have long stretches and you don't have to worry about memorizing your whole script before you go and record, that it gives you that movement. So part of setting this up is figuring out how you want to frame, right? Do you want to be on the right? Do you want to be on the left? Do you want to be in the middle? Where do you want to move at what time? And what makes the biggest impact? What helps illustrate your point? So all of these suggestions, all of these production suggestions and filming and editing ideas are to help your message, because ultimately your video is about your message and what you want to say. What movies did you love lately? What movies did you hate? What movies did you, or pop culture, like what game did you play and you thought the game was really awesome, but you just wished that the female character wasn't so terrible and such a stereotype, right? When you make these kinds of videos, which I highly suggest doing, you want to think about how your image and how your production quality will just help accentuate your image, accentuate your message. So hopefully those will be some suggestions that will help you along the way in doing this week's assignment and also potentially starting your own video series online. So thanks.
Okay, so let's take a moment and do some question and answer. I have everybody on mute, but you'll see that if you're in front of the computer, there's a little hand button. You can click the hand to raise your hand. So I'm going to just start off. If you get a question in mind and you want to ask it, just click the hand. My first question to Anita is, what are some more examples of Hollywood movies that pass the Bechdel test? What are the exemplary movies that have actually strong results?
Thanks for muting me. One thing to respond to that is that because it passes the test doesn't necessarily mean that it has strong female characters. I'm looking at you because you're in the same room, but I shouldn't do that. So passing the test doesn't mean that there's a strong female character in it at all. For example, Sex and the City passes the test with flying colors, which isn't necessarily the best representation of women. So again, it's not a qualitative statement. It's just a statement to look at the larger scale of films. What movies pass the test?
Are there any Disney movies that pass the test?
Well,
you might have to repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. He just asked if there were any Disney movies that passed the test. What's really kind of exciting is this year, Pixar, which we all know and love, has never had a female lead in any of their movies. So Up, WALL-E, Cars, none of them. This year was the very first year that Pixar released a film that had a female lead, and it was in Brave. And I highly suggest going to see it. It passes the Bechdel test with flying colors. And it has a really remarkable female character. Her and her mother are both really great in it. So that's a contemporary example of a film that both passes the test and also has some really great female characters in it.
Should we play a game where y'all nominate a movie and we run it by the Bechdel test? So in the chat, nominate some movies here. I'm going to start with, Jacob. Do you have a movie you want to nominate?
I had my hand up before this activity began, but we can do the activity. So we're nominating a movie for the belt to try and put it up to the test?
Yeah. How about What's a movie that we've all seen? Ghostbusters. Does Ghostbusters pass the Bechdel test?
I'm gonna
No,
jump in
Ghostbusters
and
in her
say
movie
probably not.
no, it's specifically on her Bechdel video. I saw Ghostbusters fly by.
I'm gonna jump in. So there's one is sometimes you have to rewatch movies to actually see it passes because sometimes it's just one tiny little line or you don't remember all of the dialogue, especially if you weren't thinking about it as you're watching the film. There is a website called, I think it's BechdelTest.com, where it's people submit tests, submit movies, and rank them, and then there's a discussion that happens because sometimes they rank them incorrectly. Sometimes sometimes it's unclear on whether it passes or not, or whether the conversation was about a man or not. And so that's a really great resource too to take a look at if you want to start thinking about, or if you want to start wondering what movies or some of your favorite movies pass or not. You can go look at that resource. Yes, whoever just put that into the chat.
So we have a question from Northampton Community Television. Their
Okay.
question is, how do you go about establishing a following for your blog?
Okay. Well, I would start by making really good videos. Honestly, like the quality and the message of your videos, take the time, write scripts, figure out what you want to say, do test shots, think of it as a production as opposed to just talking off, because if you plan it out, your message will be clearer, because you can be like, oh, this didn't really make as much sense, or this is a really great way to express this idea. And so I would start with that, because people pass around good videos, right? Most of the stuff that I find is because people send them to me or they're posted on Facebook. What I would also do is, whatever the topic is that you're talking about, engage with, or I'm assuming, it might be something that you are already involved in. So you can engage with communities online that are already talking about this, because chances are whatever you want to talk about is already being talked about to some degree somewhere. So, for example, I do pop culture stuff. So I'm really active within different pop culture blogs, other people who make video blogs, and just start making those connections and talking to people, posting, sharing other people's work. Twitter was a huge resource for me in terms of finding people who valued what I was doing, and also finding other people, and created a little community around. So a lot of it is being genuine and engaging with other people and sharing your work with them and sharing their work with your viewers and that sort of thing.
Okay, so I am going to call on Free Spirit. You guys had your hand up. But before I do, could you turn your speakers down just a little tiny bit? Okay, here goes. Free Spirit, what is your question? Did y'all have a hand up there?
Someone's typing into the chat.
We may get this.
You guys can try talking if you have your speakers down. It won't echo, but if
Okay. Well, think like a man pass test. Movie test.
Think like a man has a pet. That's the question.
That is the question.
think like a man.
Bechdel test site, right? Oh, I've been talking without. Sorry, I was muted when I was trying to respond. I haven't actually seen the movie, so I'm not sure. It might be something to check out on the Bechdel test website. Has anyone seen it? And the person who's asking, have you seen it?
Yeah,
What do you think?
I think it's pass test because there's more than two women in it. And then it's
Okay,
like
do they have names?
their real names.
No. Do they have names in the movie? Like, are they named?
Yeah, they do.
Okay. And do they talk together
Mm-hmm.
about something other than men?
Yeah, they do actually. They talk about men and then they talk about other things. So
What do they talk about?
like their jobs.
About their jobs?
Mhm.
Cool. Then I guess it passes. And again, sometimes like so if they're talking about their jobs and they're talking about how much they hate their boss and their boss is a man, then that would pass the test, right? But if they're talking about like the work that they do, then that totally would pass the test. So that's cool.
What about Twilight?
Twilight. Oh God, Twilight. Does it pass the test? Okay, yes, it does. The first one does because Bella, it's horrible that I know this. Bella, Bella and her school friends, I can't remember her name, they go shopping and they talk about dresses. So that's one example that I remember from the first movie. I don't know if what happens in the other ones. I know that like Bella and Alice, which is one of the vampires, talk, but I don't know if it's about Edward, which most likely it is. But there was a scene where it was her birthday, so there may have been something there. It's not a lot. Most of it is centered around Edward, really. But I think I'm pretty sure that at least the one or two movies do pass.
I have a question I want to ask if we're ready, but there's also a request to comment on Savages.
Yeah, so Savages is an Oliver Stone film, right, Eileen? It's an Oliver Stone film.
Oh yeah, yeah, it just came out.
And the lead character is a woman, I think, and she's in a relationship with two men. And Eileen would like you to comment on the movie Savages. What's your
Well, she
analysis?
talks with the. Oh, have you seen it, Anita?
I have not seen it, so I can't speak to it, but the Bechdel test website says that it does pass the test, apparently.
Savages is a tough one because she does talk to Salma Hayek, but she's in captivity of Salma Hayek, and they talk about. It's kind of weird.
So this is a great example. Again, it doesn't mean that it's a good or bad movie, and it doesn't mean what like it has no analysis of like if the female characters are good characters, if we would say that they're characters we aspire to have more of, right? So all of these again are just like little tiny it's one movie in the like I mean Hollywood makes like 600 movies a year, right? And I bet you that the majority of them don't pass the test. I will also say this as if you're interested, I made a follow-up video this year about the Bechdel test, which is available on my website called The Oscars and the Bechdel Test, and I looked at the nine movies nominated for Best Picture and whether they pass or not. And in that video, I talk about, I add a little addendum to the test, where I say, okay, well, there's so many times where we're sitting here quibbling about whether this one line passes the test or not. So I added an addendum where I said, well, okay, there needs to be at least 60 seconds of dialogue to make the test pass. So, you could sort of start to think of it that way. And I also addressed people have taken this test and applied it to people of color, whether there are two or more people of color with names who talk to each other about something other than a white person, which is also another really startling how few times that happens. And it shows how pigeonholed and tokenized both women and people of color are in film. And this has also been applied to comic books and video games and TV shows. So if you're interested in this, I'd suggest checking out this other video that I made as well to get a little more in depth in what the test is.
So I had a question that was kind of inspired from what Brett said in the chat earlier about talking about something critically doesn't necessarily mean something is bad. So I think a lot about sort of like the art of critiquing and the difference between critiquing something and insulting something, and kind of how you approach that and ways of managing sort of critiques. And I guess that ties into also a question about your process when you decide what to cover and what to say in your videos as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so one of the big components is that I'm a fan. Really, like I geek out on TV shows and movies and video games. Like I love this stuff. But a big component to being a fan is to simultaneously be able to enjoy and be critical, right? Like that you're not, because you critique something doesn't mean you hate it or that it shouldn't exist or that it's bad. It just means that there are things that could be improved. And so you can critique the quality of a film, right? Like I like science fiction, so God knows there's so many horrible there's some great science fiction TV shows with horrible effects in it, right? So that's a critique that people make. What I'm looking at is the way that people, specifically women, are represented, and people of color, because that actually has an impact on us as a society culturally, and the messages and myths that we are told through these through the media. And so I think that I can't stress enough that critiquing isn't just like talking badly about something. Like it's not like it's just fun to talk crap about a movie or characters or whatever it is, and that there's actually a reason to critique, that we want to see this stuff improve because we love it. We want it to be better. We want it to be accessible to everyone, to all people, not just made for a very small subsection or a particular audience. A lot of times the media caters to young white men, young white straight men. This is very indicative also in comic books. So the idea is that, we critique because we want it to get better. We want things to be made with a larger audience in mind. And so, this isn't about insulting or talking crap about something, but this is actually about wanting a much better media landscape that's much more inclusive. There's a question from Payback. We heard that some of your awesome videos have been attacked by a cyber mob. It's brought up questions at Bayback around the ethics of creating media, the power of code and the web, and who has access to not just creating media, but controlling and bullying mob style on media creation web. What do you think we need to do or be mindful of as young creators of media? That is a great question. So I was, throughout this process of the years that I've been doing this, I have received a tremendous amount of harassment, a lot through YouTube and YouTube comments. And I was actually just the target of a very large scale, what I call cyber mob, which is a loosely organized mob of anonymous people online who attacked me across all of various social media, right? So YouTube, Twitter, my email. I was running a Kickstarter campaign, which is a fundraising platform. It was through there as well, and on, which is sort of the extreme end of this. It was a very particular thing that happened. But I think that it's also important to understand that harassment does happen. And so what I do is I build in, from the beginning, I moderate all of my comments. And that is one way in which you can control your space and control what you allow to come through. I think of my videos and my website and all of my spaces online as living room. So what would you allow people to say in your living room, and what wouldn't you? So if someone came into my living room and started saying really nasty things to me, like the B word or other misogynist slurs, I would kick them out. So in the same way, I moderate my comments to not allow those to come through, because I, one, don't want to be called those things, but two, because I don't want everyone else coming and watching my videos to be subjected to that. I really want to create a place in which people can engage with feminist ideas or critical ideas of the media in a way where they're not going to get ridiculed for saying something or harassed for saying something. And so I think that the one thing that I can really stress is to moderate your comments. And if you want, turn them off. Like, there's no harm in that. There's no censorship or freedom of speech issue with you moderating your comments. You have complete freedom to do what you want to do online. Not do what you want to do, sorry, but you have a complete freedom to control what comments come through and what don't in your online space. And so I would take advantage of that. Yes, that would be my response to that. Also, yes, that's my response.
Anita, I had a question about.
There's other questions out there? Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I just had a question about Kickstarter. What that was like. It must have been quite cool to see that response from people. It's kind of new and different, but it seems like you raised like quite a healthy amount of money for an idea, and just curious because I've never been through that process myself, what it's like, and where you're going to go next with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. I've been doing feminist frequency sort of out of pocket in my spare time and through donations. And so this time I decided to run a Kickstarter, which for those of you who aren't familiar, Kickstarter is a website in which you can raise money for a project. So people use it for all kinds of different things between, there's a lot of video games and comic books and documentaries. People make actual like gadgets. I saw one that was like a stylus that you can use on your iPad that is a better one than ones that are on the market. So there's all kind like bike gadgets. There's all kinds of stuff on Kickstarter. So I decided to try that out and see if I could raise money to do a video series. And the series that I'm working on right now is looking at the representations of women in video games. And unfortunately, what happened was I was attacked for that by a section of the internet that was not happy that I was speaking about video games. And as that was happening, I publicized some of it, which it's on my website, but I don't know if you actually want to go see it because it's really nasty. But as a way to talk about a larger scale and how women face harassment on the internet every day, all the time, to lesser and greater degrees. And the support that I received from people was remarkable and incredible, and it was really, really encouraging to see so many people who condemned this kind of large scale, who condemned online harassment. And so that also helped bring attention to my project. And I've gotten really great feedback about the project from all kinds of people, gaming, within the gaming industry, outside of the gaming industry, and also people from the industry actually reached out to me, which was sort of new. I'm used to talking to, the internet and fans, and so now I sort of have the ear of the gaming industry, and so, that's kind of awesome if they, will take the time to look at my videos and maybe consider some of the things that I'm saying. So it was a really incredible experience in terms of the support that I got and just going through the process of raising money and what that means. I am familiar with Gina Davis. For those of you who may not know who Gina Davis is, she is a Hollywood actor. She is most notable for starring in Thelma and Louise, which definitely passes the Bechdel test. She's also was in A League of Their Own, which was a film about these are so old, which is a film about women entering baseball for the first time. And she's done a lot of other work since then. She was played the first female president on a TV show that was short-lived. She started a company, or like a research company, called the Gina Davis Media Institute. I don't know why I'm blanking on that. But she basically started a research project where they found, yes, A League of Their Own is awesome. That's so distracting. She started a research project where she looked at the way that the girls or representations of girls and women in G-rated films, so we're talking about like younger audience movies, are represented, and she found just staggering statistics. They're all available on her website, but it was just there was many more male characters in these movies. And they also found that the female representations in G-rated films of women are often very sexualized, in much the same way that older PG-13 or R-rated movies are, except in cartoon form. And so she found these really, really staggering results that I highly suggest looking up if you're interested in this topic. And so she's got a lot of resources on her website. More questions. Am I planning to change my production style based on having presumably a much larger budget? I'm going to have a very similar, so I've always tried from the beginning to have a professional style. That was sort of one of the things that I strived to do. Having a bigger budget in terms of upgrading my equipment is going to help a lot in terms of adding like effects and adding better lighting and that sort of thing. So I'm going to keep a similar style, but I'm just going to add to it. So that's what will happen next. But I don't want that to discourage people from making videos with, like, when I started, I got, like, first I started by tacking a piece of fabric on the wall. And then I got PVC piping, which is really cheap. It's like $2. And I bought fabric and I clipped it with hair clips. I actually am still doing that right now for my little videos. So there are a lot of ways that you can do really low budget, but make it look a little bit higher budget. And lots of resources online for that, especially with lighting and that sort of thing. So. Are there other questions?
Cool. That may be it. This has been awesome, I think. I learned a lot. And I'm going to be checking out the Bechdel test reference every time I see a movie now. I want to thank Anita for a really, really excellent hour. And I'm really excited to see what you guys make with some of these tips. So if there's not any other questions, I think we're going to take off. But we'll be around all weekend. We really want to see what you do. I like that. That was cool.
Thank you.
Round of applause.